Hey guys, Comet here. Welcome to episode 19 in my Overly Scienced series. Now this episode is going to be a little bit different from all the others. There's a bunch of little things I needed to get done throughout the base, such as finishing off the second Regolith melter, putting in the rockets over here, heating up this block, expanding the hatch ranch, and a couple modifications down here at the bottom of the base. So I'll start here with the Regolith melter. It is slightly different. Instead of having the E shape, I have an upside down L. And this is because when the Regolith was melting in the corner tiles of the E, I was just losing that magma. So the counterflow wasn't balanced, right? There was more mass coming in than there was leaving, so the temperatures were getting all screwed up. So it's the only modification I made here, and I did that same thing over on this side. And the other thing I changed here, right underneath the rocket exhaust, it's a solid diamond, so there's no steam in this area. And likewise on the right side of the map. Now this is a minor point, but it is worth pointing out. The conveyor rail shutoffs that used to be here, I took them out because I started thinking, well, this Regolith is essentially free, so there's no point in trying to save it or store it up when I need extra power, especially when the secondary purpose of all of these is power. The primary purpose is to feed all of the hatches. So if I were to stop the incoming Regolith because I don't need the power, well then I'm going to be starving all my hatches. And the Regolith melter on this side is identical. Since there's two lines of hot igneous rock coming in over here, these aqua tuners are actually having a harder time keeping this room cold. It looks like it's staying right around 0 degrees. So that means my igneous rock is leaving quite a bit warmer. And that's eventually going to cause problems in this room here. It's getting significantly warmer now. And so my plan to counteract that, well, it's a combination of two things really. All of this space that used to be over here was kind of just dead space required to keep the hatches from getting overcrowded. But I remembered that I could put farm tiles here and grow plants, and it won't interfere with the hatch ranch. So by using the water that comes in to fertilize the bristle blossoms, I can maintain a maximum temperature for all of these rooms up here. It's going to take 2 pipes worth of clean water. If we do the math here, there's 17 per farm, and I have 8 floors, so times 8. And then there's 4 sections, so times 4. Then if we go over to the bristle blossom here, we can see that it requires 20 kilograms of water per cycle. So we can multiply the 544 bristle blossoms by the 20 kilograms, and then divide that by 600 to give kilograms per second. So it's going to take 18.13 kilograms to feed all of these bristle blossoms. And that means I'm going to need 2 pipes of clean water. I've also set up some sweepers and conveyor loaders so that a lot of the tasks are offloaded onto these and the dupes won't have to do as much work. And then I plan on shipping all of the bristle blossoms down over to this electric grill. So before, I was shipping out all of the eggs and then cracking them down in this egg cracker. That way I could make omelet. Now the eggs, I can use 1 egg to make 1 omelet, which is 2800 calories. Or I could use that egg, hatch it inside of this, as Francis John likes to call it, an evolution chamber. It just drowns the babies as soon as they hatch, and that turns them into meat, which can be used to make barbecue. And barbecue has a higher calorie output. So it is beneficial to allow the babies to hatch instead of cracking their eggs. And if that wasn't enough, you can look at the quality of the food. An omelet gives +2 morale, barbecue gives +3. So you have an added bonus there as well. So now if I move all of the bristle blossoms up to here, I wouldn't need this thing anymore. I've run out of slime to feed all of these mushrooms, and mealwood it's a great early game food, but now that I'm, 3,000 cycles in, I really shouldn't be on mealwood. So this will eventually go, and it will be replaced by all of this up here. So to provide all of the water for this, my plan, I don't really want to use all of these buildings anymore, because they require duplicate labor to keep filling them up, and I don't know what they do to the desalinator, but they do something to it, and then it drops salt on the ground, and then it starts working again. So I want to try and build a boiler using an aqua tuner, so I could throw polluted water, salt water, and even clean water at it, and it will just boil it all off into steam. And then in the room next to it, where it can draw the heat from, can be the condenser to turn all of that steam back into water, and then I can pump out the water as needed. I think that might be a little bit better than all of these buildings here. Now, this water tank is going to have to go as well, because I need all of this space here, and probably a little higher, maybe up to here, for the sour gas boiler. And what it will do, it will take crude oil, turn it into petroleum, just like the petroleum boiler does, but it will go one step further, turn it into sour gas, and then condense that sour gas into methane, and then heat that methane back up into natural gas. So it's kind of a convoluted process there. But once you have natural gas, it does all of this at a 67% efficient ratio. So if you pump in 10 kilograms worth of natural gas, or of crude oil, and you multiply that by the efficiency, this is how many grams of natural gas you'd get as the output. And then that brings me to all of these natural gas generators. So a single natural gas generator can consume 90 grams per second. So if we divide the output of the natural gas generator by 90, that gives us 75 natural gas generators, which are all right here. So there's this extra line over here. That's mainly to make this symmetrical, but it also allows me to burn off this natural gas from down here. And then that's just mirrored on the other side, because I plan on having 2 natural gas boilers, or sour gas boilers. So if we take a look at some of the overlays here, this is the cooling loop. 1 aqua tuner should be sufficient, because if we take the power output, or the heat output, that's 10 kilodtus. Now there's a total of 12 times 7 natural gas generators, so 12 times 7, then times the 10 kilodtus, that's 840. And an aqua tuner, when using supercoolant, can move, if we do the math here, the specific heat capacity of supercoolant is 8.44. There's 10,000 grams, that's 10 kilos, per bubble in the pipe, times 14 degrees. An aqua tuner running supercoolant can move this many kilodtus worth of heat, and so this is greater than the 840 that's going to be produced inside the insulated tiling here. So 1 aqua tuner should keep up. I haven't done much with the ventilation yet. That's just because they're not plugged in. But these over here that run off of this natural gas, I have connected up their carbon dioxide, and it just spits it out over here. Now I won't be able to do that for all of the generators here. I'll have to figure out what to do with all of that carbon dioxide. I'm thinking I'm going to remove all of these carbon skimmers and put in gas pumps instead, and then pump all of this carbon dioxide, and maybe all of the carbon dioxide from over here into a single room that has all of the carbon skimmers in it, and I'll probably put that right next to the water refinement boiling facility that I just talked about. That way the water doesn't have to move very far. The other thing I threw in, which I should have done a very, very long time ago, is this heat recycling plant here. If we take a look at the plumbing overlay here, the output from these refineries goes up into this steam room so that I can turn the heat that the refinery makes into power, and I can put that power right back into the refinery. And if you do steel, iron, and wolframite, and I think aluminum will actually work, it is power positive, meaning you get more power out of the heat that the refinery makes than it takes to run the refinery to complete the recipe. Steel gives you the most, and then iron, and then I think wolframite, and then aluminum and copper are on the same level. Gold is the only one. I've actually never tested thermium to niobium, because this recipe is kind of useless. It just consumes all of your tungsten. There's no point in using this recipe. but gold is the only one that costs more power than it gives back. So let me explain how this plumbing works here. The reservoir acts as a buffer, so temperatures get averaged inside of it. That way you have a more stable power draw. So as the refinery pumps out a lot of really hot liquid, it can get averaged in the reservoir, and then it can slowly pull the heat from that reservoir as it cycles. But the plumbing here, it goes from the output of the reservoir into a bridge. That bridge sends it on priority down into the refinery. That way the refinery, if it ever needs more coolant, it always has access to it. And then if the refinery is full, it goes onto this bridge here, so that it can go back into the steam room to be cooled. And then it comes back down into the reservoir. Then the output from the refinery goes straight up into the steam room, and since this bridge right here, trying to pull from the reservoir, is on a bridge, the priority is on the refinery. That way, when it needs to empty, it can be emptied and not have to wait for this liquid here. And then that is stackable across. You can see how I did the cooling loop here as well. So this room down here does need to be cooled off because the refineries, not only do they put heat into the coolant that runs through them, but they also heat up themselves. So you need some kind of atmosphere behind them, and you need to cool off that atmosphere. So that's what this cooling loop does. And then it also cools off these turbines up here. Now I've also thrown in a bunch of these kilns with a visco vacuum lock here. That way my dupes can get in and out to supply the kilns. So I'm just capturing a little more heat from these kilns than when I had them up here. Now there's another thing I want to go over about the kilns. You may see some new recipes in here. That's because I found a mod called Seed Kiln. And it allows you to turn all of the seeds that you accumulate into coal. Because once you have a bunch of seeds, you can't do anything with them. There's no way I'm going to plant 18,000 mealwood seeds and then try and fertilize all of them. That's not going to happen. So I'm using this mod to turn them into coal. And coal, well, I don't really have a use for coal either, but I'd rather have more coal than a bunch of useless seeds. Now, this recipe right here, the blossom seed to coal, is not in the mod. I had to go in and put it in myself, and I'll show you how to do that if you're interested. So you're going to go to your documents, find the clay file, oxygen not included, mods, Steam, and then the kiln mod should be this one right here, if you can see this number. But you could also look inside. It gives you a little preview where it says files. I can see that seedkiln.ddl or DLL or D11, I don't know what that is in there. So I'm going to click here. Then I'm going to open up this XML document with with Notepad. And then this right here is what I added to get Bristle Blossom seeds to work. So I will copy this and leave this in the description in case you want to use this mod and you also want to use Bristle Blossoms. So once you've inserted this, you just hit File, Save, and then relaunch everything, and you should be good to go. Then the last thing I did, if you remember back to Petroleum Boiler 1.0, which was not as clean looking as this, but I went ahead and I put the Petroleum Boiler 2.0 on the left side of the map. And I haven't quite gotten enough copper. I'm out of copper for all of these shift plates in here. And that is even with this volcano going. I am completely out of copper ore and refined copper. So it is just a mirror copy of this boiler over here. Now, I want to address some of the comments. Now, Hunter L thinks that this is one of the most inefficient petroleum boilers he's ever seen. Now, he's referring to the Petroleum Boiler 1.0, and I don't know what other petroleum boilers he's looked at, but let's go ahead and do some math on this, shall we? Now, this aqua tuner, which provides the heat that actually keeps this whole thing working, only runs about 3% of the time. So just from that, this is 97% efficient. It only consumes, if we take the power from the aquatuner, so 1200 watts, we can take 1200 watts times 0.03. This is on average going to use about 36 watts. So since this is the newer one, right, I have to do the math on the older one. So instead of the heat being provided by the petroleum, which makes this one a little bit more efficient, it was instead provided by a liquid tepidizer, which draws 960 watts to produce 4,064 kilodtus. So if I open up Paint here, 4,064 kilodtus. But this is per 960 watts. So this ratio is going to be important later, because the aquatuner, if you remember, only runs 3% of the time, which means it's not always going to be drawing heat from the tepidizer. So an aquatuner using supercoolant that runs 100% of the time, I just did this calculation over on the natural gas generators, but we can do it here, 8.44 times the mass of the supercoolant, then times the temperature difference, which is 14 degrees, is going to move this much heat. But since it's only being used 3% of the time, we can see how much heat is being moved. So times 0.03. So 35 kilodtus is how much heat this aquatuner would be drawing from the tepidizer. So if we ratio this as well, 35, 448, and this is in kilodtus, so we have to put a decimal point here. We're solving for this variable, so just cross multiply. We end up with an equation that looks like this. Now, the kilodtus here and here will reduce out, and then we need to move this variable over to the right side, so we get x equals 960 watts times 35.44 all over 4064. So when we do this on the calculator, 960 times 35.44 divided by 4064, we get 8.372 watts that the tepidizer will be providing. Then we need to add in the watts that the aquatuner uses to actually move that heat, and it runs 3% of the time, so I already did this, the 1200 times 0.03, 36 watts. So we can add that to the 8.372 for a total of 44.3 watts. So this is how many watts the petroleum boiler 1.0 uses to convert crude oil into petroleum. Now if you want, you could throw in the pump power, which is 240 watts, but every petroleum boiler is going to need a pump, no matter how you set it up. So if you want to be really picky, you could say that this really costs 284 watts to run. Now if we look at the petroleum boiler 2.0, which doesn't have a tepidizer, it only has an aquatuner, we only need to take into consideration the power that the aquatuner uses. And I've done this several times already, so 1200 times 0.03. And if you really want to, you can add in the 240. So this only takes 276 watts. Now, you have to keep in mind that if you're using Magma to boil your petroleum, it's not free. You have to consider the opportunity cost of using that Magma. Now, the most common petroleum boiler is a Magma-based petroleum boiler. So if we assume that we're only going to be drawing from the Magma what this aquatuner needs to be providing here, so I'll give that petroleum boiler the benefit of the doubt, and it has a 97% efficient counterflow, which most of them don't. We can see the heat that we need to draw from the Magma to maintain this temperature in here. So if this is running 3% of the time, right, we just multiply its total heat displacement by 0.03. So I did this calculation already as well, but we can do it again. When it's running supercoolant, we use the specific heat capacity of supercoolant, so 8.44 times 10,000 times the 14-degree delta. Then we multiply this by 0.03. So from the magma, we would be drawing 35.5 kilodtus. If we go to the cooling calculator, we can see this conversion right here. So a steam turbine, for every 1,032.5 DTUs that you run into it, it will produce 1 watt of power. So instead of spending all of the heat in the magma on boiling petroleum, you can throw it into a steam turbine and get power that way. So if we go back to paint with this number in mind, and we know we are consuming this many DTUs from the magma, we can see how much power we're actually spending to convert the petroleum in a magma-based petroleum boiler. So we can set up another ratio here, 35,448, that's a terrible 8, DTUs, over X. And I'll solve this the same way, and we get something that looks a little bit like this. All we need to do is divide both sides by the 1032. The units will reduce out, and we're left with this. And this comes out to about 34.3 watts. So by using a magma-based petroleum boiler, you give up this many watts from the magma, and if you use the petroleum boiler I have here, if you remember back to that calculation, it's going to cost you 36 watts. So between these two, I guess technically a magma-based petroleum boiler is very, very slightly more power efficient, but I don't want to have to rely on magma to boil my petroleum. I don't want to have to deal with the RoboMiner to dig out the igneous rock, which I haven't even factored into this, so that's going to skew this number unfavorably. And for a difference of only 1.7 watts, I would much rather go with this petroleum boiler, because it's just so much simpler. Now, I guess one of the downsides, it does require thermium, but from a sheer mathematical standpoint, it is not the most power inefficient boiler. Now, the other comment I want to address is this one from Zilch. He suggested I make a wish list so that I could get a new mic, and I've had some other people suggest other ways of getting a clearer sound on my voice. So I'll go ahead and leave a mic I picked out on Amazon in the description. I'm not sure how wish lists work, if one person has to pay for all of it, or if you guys could just do like a penny each or something. But if you're interested, I will leave that there, and I'm also going to try some different audio editing tricks to try and make myself sound a little bit clearer. So that was a little bit of a different episode, but there's a lot of miscellaneous stuff I needed to take care of. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.